Katrina, as most of you know, has become a monster of a hurricane, a Category 5 storm with winds of 160, 165 miles an hour. A storm expected to make landfall around sunrise in New Orleans. A storm on track to be the biggest hurricane ever to hit the United States.
The fact that we went from 175 miles per hour down to 165, that's the difference between being run over by an 18-wheeler or by a freight train, and neither prospect is good.
Zack and Addie rode out the storm together and fell in love. It was not the best time to fall in love. They told CNN reporters wandering around the desolate French Quarter after the storm that they never wanted to leave New Orleans. Little did they know, they never would. This bartender couple hung on through the impending chaos and violence that grew in New Orleans the following year after Katrina. Their rocky romance stayed glued together with sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But something dark was brewing in the city. It was latching onto everyone and everything. It certainly could have found the perfect host in Zack and Addie. No one was safe. In October 2006, the year after Katrina, they needed to find a new place to live and perhaps a fresh start. Zack and Addie were forced to move out of their nearby French Quarter shotgun shack. The small apartment here at 826 North Rampart seemed a good choice. Trouble followed. Immediately, she tried to get Zachary off the lease. He was cheating on her, she confided to Leo, the landlord, but it wasn't something Leo wanted to be a part of. Personal issues of tenants were issues they needed to work out between themselves. Leo never heard back. Zack and Addie lived together upstairs only for a few days, but both stayed for about 2 weeks. They never even unpacked. He strangled her during a fight. Zachary admitted in a suicide note that murder was quick. Nothing after that was quick. This deadly domestic dispute was the first crime, but there was more. Over the next week and a half, he dismembered her body in a bathtub and began to slowly cook away the evidence. Zack ended his own life nearly 11 days later by jumping off the roof of a nearby hotel with a suicide note and confession in his pocket. This note was graphic and led the police back to the Rampart Street apartment, the grisly scene of the crime. Her head was boiling in one pot, her hands and feet in another. In the oven, her legs and arms were set on slow cook for nearly 2 weeks, while her torso was chilling in the fridge. Spray paintings on the walls sent messages of despair, and diary pages of confessions and self-loathing scattered the floor. Their shocking story rocked New Orleans in drop-jawed disbelief combined with mourning. Yet some also got scared straight through this violence, for theirs is a cautionary tale. Many New Orleanians had PTSD from the hurricane, crippled further with the weight of their own personal baggage in tow. The impending gloom and doom in the city at the time was referred to as Katrina crazy. Anger was ricocheting all over town as more darkness oozed from the crevasse. This time in town grew the highest crime rate ever before or since. Most of the ghosts may have left, but the dark side ran rampant. This story hit home, and people realized they better straighten up quick. The fate of Zack and Addie provided a bit of those missing checks and balances needed in such a dark time in New Orleans history. That is no excuse for what happened, but perhaps a few found their way back through this tale and still do. Aftermath. You should know that Zack did not eat Addie, though rumors of cannibalism persist. An autopsy proved otherwise, and it was common knowledge. There was a network show which focused on their own two slants, cannibalism and voodoo. They named the show Katrina Cannibal, knowing otherwise. Many voodoo practitioners, myself included here in town, also told them that this crime had nothing to do with voodoo, that they had their own agenda. A murder-suicide above a voodoo spiritual temple was far too tempting an angle for them to ignore and report truthfully. I refuse any shows that we do here to use those angles if they want access. Zack and Addie brought their troubles with them here from out there. They were barely here 3 days before this incident. Things were latching on from the outside in our ghost town covered with horror to a majority of people. Add drugs and alcohol, Katrina crazy, and a nasty haint spirit, and PTSD with plain old out-of-control passion on top, and you've created a recipe for disaster. It was not demons from the voodoo spiritual temple like the show tried to claim, but perhaps the primordial darkness incarnate slithering all over our town. For a full 3 years after Katrina, all we did was banishings, cleansings, and exorcisms on people, places, and things. This was my job. Things are back balanced here now, but it was a difficult time. My job is to further preserve all the stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly of my hometown. Through the telling of their tales, and providing a sanctuary for their spirits. Thank you, Bloody Mary.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? It's your boy, Dog Waters. Really quickly, I get a lot of requests for Hurricane Katrina stories, so I decided to release this story of Zack and Addie. This is the truth about what happened at the Rampart Murder Street house between Zack and Addie. Now, if you want to hear more Katrina stories and learn more about voodoo and hoodoo out of New Orleans, it's really, really easy. iTunes or Apple, and type in the Bloody